Hello, everybody, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for November 7th through November 13th of 2022. My name is Cam White, and you know what we have going on this week. However, we're going to go over the highlights anyway. We have the absolutely wild total lunar eclipse in Taurus this week, the day of the midterms, and it's going to be pretty intense. I'm going to talk a little bit about it as we go along. But also on the total lunar eclipse in Taurus, we have the Mercury cazimi happening this week. That is when Mercury conjoins the sun and kind of gets refreshed and, purified almost in a sense. But the Mercury cazimi and the eclipse are both on and opposite Uranus. Lots of instability this week, lots of just upheaval and ripping the roots out from the ground. It's some pretty intense stuff we'll talk about. We have Venus trine Neptune, which I like for delusion. I know some of you are living delusionally, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but maybe this time it will work out a little bit better. Mercury square Saturn, that's kind of going nowhere fast with communication. No one's going to want to talk about anything. And Mercury trines Neptune, where, again, a little more of the delusion stuff. And I'm being a little bit hard on Neptune, but we'll talk about it as the week goes on. So first off, on Monday, the only thing that we have going on is the moon ingressing into Taurus. Not too much other planetary energy happening. However, why that's significant is this is building up for the total lunar eclipse in Taurus on Uranus. So as this moon enters Taurus, it's gaining in light, right? We're about to have what is called a blood moon. And the blood moon happens I feel like every time I go on social media, it's like rare blood moon that happens once every 400 years. It's an eclipse. It happens every 6 months. Not that big of a deal. But this one's a big deal because it has so much else going on with it. Now, as the moon goes into Taurus, we're just simply building up to this total lunar eclipse. And as the moon goes into Taurus, usually we would be focused on grounding ourselves, getting, some type of stability together, nourishing ourselves. But that does not seem like the case this go around. Monday is a build-up into Tuesday. Monday is this prelude into Tuesday. But this is the thing. We're talking about Taurus Scorpio stuff. If any of you guys listen to rap, RIP Takeoff, by the way, Future is born on a Scorpio Sun Taurus moon. And if you don't know who Future is the definition of Scorpio and Taurus, because all of his music is I'm a drug addict and I'm full of sorrow, but also I have so much money that I don't know what to do with myself, and I only find love and happiness through money. He's the perfect example of the Scorpio-Taurus axis. I love Future. He's my favorite rapper, besides Currency. But as the moon goes into Taurus, we're focusing on, again, what would be grounding, what would be stabilizing, what are we securing ourselves in. However, that's not what the case is. And I guess it's difficult to talk about because everything kind of changes on Tuesday. So I'll put it to you this way. On Monday, you're going to feel like things are feeling secure and that you're trying to securitize something, but it's not going to be that way. The way I would look at this is, if you are trying to not have a certain event happen in your life and you are really holding it together, and you're kind of bending a little bit, Tuesday is when things snap. But the other way I would look at Monday is this is a really good day to figure out, for example, as the moon's going into Taurus, we're going to want to be comfortable. We're going to want to relax. But the moon, this total lunar eclipse is a really good day to do something really random, to kind of snap, to really, throw a wrench in your plans, but on purpose, right? It's kind of put a shock to your body. And so on Monday, it's kind of feeling like you want to be comfortable, but you're not comfortable. It's when maybe you just want to sit on the couch and be a couch potato, but you know that you have responsibilities and other things. I mean, have you ever been in a point where your life where, you just want to be in your comfort zone and that comfort zone is no longer comfortable and it just weighs on you? Maybe you're just kind of tired of being, stuck or complacent. That's what Monday's going to feel like. There's something where you're going to want to feel comfortable. You're going to want to feel secure, but it's not happening. Then we get to Tuesday. And as you notice, there's no glyphs here on Tuesday. It's literally just everything. Total lunar eclipse conjoining Uranus. This the eclipse is literally highlighting Uranus, the planet of, rebellion, the planet of, freedom, the planet of instability, innovation, shocks and awes, the planet of science, the planet of technology, the planet of revolutions. And there's a Mercury cazimi, which is all about clarity, like light bulb moments, like all of a sudden it just hits, all of a sudden it just makes sense, and it is opposite Uranus. And we'll have the moon making a square to Saturn going opposite Venus. So here's the deal. Number one, I just want to make a quick prediction about the midterms. And I've been saying this forever. It's going to be a red wave. Abortion's not going to move the needle like people think it's going to, or at least what you're being propagated to believe. But here's the thing that I will say about this election is one of two things that are probably going to happen. One, I do think there's going to be a lot of violence. I don't like to say, because this is also going to trigger a bunch of people, and I'm not trying to put my opinions out. Like, this isn't like the whole idea of stolen elections. I don't really believe like the 2016 or the 2021. I don't really have opinions of whether those are stolen, but if there was an election that had astrological symbolism of things being stolen or things being ripped up or things just all of a sudden being put to an end, it's this one. And I'm going purely off the astrological symbolism here. I know I do. I have a bias, of course, because I'm a human being, and I do put that in my astrology sometimes. But it doesn't really matter what you affiliate as. This is a lot of instability for an eclipse. Like, eclipses are typically really crazy times in general, but the fact that it's exactly on Uranus, the fact that it's also Mercury Cazimi, which we'll get to in just a second. So I just want to say, if you have to go to if you have to do in-person voting, luckily in Colorado, like, this is one thing I don't get about Republicans. I love mail voting. Mailing voting is sick, and I know a lot of people are going to get upset about me for saying that, but I'm already registered to vote because Colorado has that, and that's already happening. But like, if you have to like go to a location, not to like, just be safe. Look, this is a pretty intense eclipse, and so things are really divided in this country right now. This is a very unsafe eclipse, in my opinion. And I really do say that out of like genuine concern. So I really think that this is some gnarly stuff. I really think that it's going to really put some instability. I mean, this country's already has a lot of instability, but this is really gnarly. But let's start talking about it on this personal level. For one, this is an eclipse, and eclipses are like portals. They're like emergency events. And it is highlighted by Uranus. And Uranus is, again, liberation, instability, random acts of, revolution. And it's in Taurus. So we're talking about, food. We're talking about value. We're talking about goods. And as this total lunar eclipse highlights Uranus, this is things literally snapping. Fixed signs do not bend, they break. And this is a breaking point. Now, it's hard to talk about this eclipse without bringing up Mercury Cazimi. Because what a Cazimi is when a planet conjoins the sun. And Mercury is on the far side of the sun right now and is going to conjoin it. And it's like the way I like to analogize it is it's like a light bulb moment. All of a sudden, like Mercury Cazimis are a message comes in. A message gets delivered. In your personal life, you're probably going to get an announcement of something. Someone's going to tell you something, and it's going to shock you. It's going to bring a lot of instability. But this isn't Scorpio. There's something hidden that is going to come out. Remember all my poop analogies last week? I talked a little bit about cleaning your septic tank. This is one of those moments where maybe you have a septic tank and you're like, I'll clean it later. And then you just do that one little flush and you look outside and poop starts bubbling up. In fact, this is a great example. I just saw a reel. I was on Instagram and I saw a reel of someone lifting up a septic tank and the tree roots got into the septic tank. So the tree roots were like sucking in all of this poop, which is really bad because that means not only is there poop and shit like flowing throughout their yard, but they have to replace their whole septic tank because the roots got to it. It is uncanny of the symbolism of that with this eclipse. And I know that happened, not on this day, but just use that as an example. Mercury, Cazimi, and Scorpio, and I've said this a lot. Scorpio, when you look around in fall, or at least here, where in Denver we get all 4 seasons. Scorpio season, all of the plants shed their leaves and they bring their energy into their roots so they could survive the winter. And when it comes to Scorpio, we're talking about things underneath the ground. We're talking about the roots of the tree, right? When you have a Mercury Cazimi and you have this kind of announcement or this clarity or this message incoming, in Scorpio, on the South Node, there is something that was hidden underneath that you did not know that is going to be uprooted. Another thing that I saw was, for example, I would love to know if I have any arbors that follow me. If an arbor is a person who cut trees, I'm pretty sure that's the right word. But like, if you're going to rip out a tree, it's probably best to cut the stump off first. Because if you just try to uproot it, those roots could go very, very far. Like certain trees, their roots go down, and other trees, their roots go out. And if you rip out one of those, for example, my stepdad actually, I think I just used this analogy earlier, but they had to pull a tree out at their house because the roots went so far wide, it was breaking up the foundation. And so this is one of those moments, but this is also squaring Saturn here. I mean, and I think, and like, let's be real. I think this election would have been divisive either way, but like, this is really dividing. I'm like, this is going to be a pretty gnarly eclipse. I think if you're expecting like Democrats to stay in power, I think you're going to be sorely mistaken, or at least disappointed. But what I will say too is, I wouldn't be like, again, I'm not trying to be an election denier, but this is like, so there's something gnarly about this eclipse. It's really baked into this is if we brought back an ancient astrologer from thousands of years ago, they would look at this and be like, the king will fall and the citizens will scramble. Like, that is just very easy omen, like, based symbology, just looking at the astrology. But again, going back to the personal stuff, I mean, there is something that's buried underneath. There is some type of click that needs to happen. Scorpio is that stuff that's buried. Like, for example, Scorpio rules my 12th house. I've been tweeting. I'm back on Twitter, by the way. A lot of people don't know that, but I've been tweeting a little bit about how like Scorpio ruling my 12th house is awful. The price of being a Sag rising is having Scorpio rule your 12th house. And someone said the funniest comment ever. They called that the clown tax, and that's just everything bad that happened to Sagittarius. I just want to call it the clown tax now. But anyway, Scorpio rules my 12th house. And, my 5th ruler and my 12th ruler are connected. The 5th house is like substances, like drugs and alcohol. My 12th house, like the 12th house is like, subconscious fears, repressed parts of yourself. And I'm an addict. I've talked a lot about that, and I struggle with addiction my whole life. And right now I'm sober. I've still kind of going back and forth with cigarettes. I know, I'm sorry, they're super gross. But I really kind of stopped weed, and I'm not really a big drinker anyway, but I quit weed pretty much right when that eclipse happened in my 12th house, and right when Mars went retrograde. And Mars is my 5th ruler and my 12th ruler, so that's going backwards, where I'm rethinking my relationship to substances. I'm rethinking why I use substances and what parts of my life that I repress and how that manifests itself through substances. And I'm bringing this up because the Scorpio 12th house stuff for me, to use myself as an example, is there's going to be some type of clarity of why I do things. The 12th house is also hidden enemy, so maybe a hidden enemy gets revealed in my life. I don't know. But I look at the Scorpio stuff as there's something buried underneath. There's something buried underground that has to come up, that has to reveal itself. And it's not going to be, stable. Like, this is also in my 6th house of like health and day-to-day activities. And I'm actually really crushing my diet right now. I've been really strict about it. I'm not losing weight at the moment. I'll get back to the gym in a minute. But I wouldn't be surprised if this brought up a lot of health matters for me. I know I'm just talking about myself here, but I'm just using that as an example of, when you talk about the Scorpio stuff, let's say it's your 2nd house. Let's say if you're a Scorpio 2nd house, that means you are a Libra rising. So this has to do with money and finances. There's some type of, all of a sudden, some money problem comes up and you have to pay some bills. Maybe this is an 8th house thing. Maybe you have a hospital trip. Maybe, some debt, like, maybe if you are invested and you get a margin call. This is like a margin call for the Libra risings. That's actually really funny. That's really funny. If you don't understand that or get that, I'm sorry, but that's margin call for the Libra risings. But let's say, you're a Scorpio rising. There's some type of truth being revealed in a relationship, and there's some type of instability with the relationship. And, Saturn's right here. If you're a Scorpio rising, this is, really kind of getting in the way of home, family matters, living situation issues. Let's say you're a Leo rising. There's something going on with your home and your family that is like being uprooted, that might bring some instability to your career or your reputation. And that could also be relationships too. But what I'm trying to sit here and say is, it's one of those things where at some point you have to do the dirty work. If you haven't changed the oil on your car in a long time, your car's going to stall. Your shit's going to get fucked. That's really the best. That's actually a really Scorpio eclipse. Your shit's going to get fucked. That's like the best Scorpio words and Taurus words. And, the thing is with the Scorpio stuff, I really also want to say too, there's a lot of pain here. This is why I use the Future analogy. If you don't listen to Future, he's my favorite rapper. A lot of you guys probably wouldn't like his lyrics, but what I like about Future is like in all of his songs, it's literally like, I drink codeine to literally like kill myself, but also I have so much money that I'm better than you. And it's just this weird mixture of like, pain and resentment, but, you know, coping with it with like luxury goods and things like that. And there's so much pain in this one. And I don't want to say healing, if you see online, people are going to be like, it's an eclipse. It's a time to heal yourself. This is not one of those days to like just not just sit around and not do anything, but it's very radical. Do you need a radical realization? Do you need a radical truth being revealed to you? And a lot of the times with the Scorpio stuff, it's all stuff that you know already. It's just stuff that you don't want to see. I talked last week about the shadowy figures that operate behind closed doors, and that's what Scorpio is. And it's like, when you're finally able to admit that there are powers that, control situations that might, manipulate or distort our way of thinking, when you're able to kind of accept that, it gives you a different perspective on what's real, what's not, who's in control, who's not in control. And I know I'm just kind of riffing off here, but I just want to say this is really shocking. And the way I would look at this is a lot like if you're trying to hold it together, you're going to break. And maybe we need to break. Like maybe there needs to be a snapping point. A lot of people repress their anger, and it's much far more dangerous because when people repress their anger and their sorrows and their frustration, it manifests as illness, and illness, plagues this country like no other. And, rather than just pushing it down like that Scorpio stuff, let me push my feelings down, let me push it all down, maybe it needs to be broken. And this is all Taurus stuff. Taurus is like peace and beauty, and maybe this needs to be broken up a little bit. Maybe things need to be hashed out a little bit. So I don't want to say go crazy on this one. Like you need to have self-control, but don't maybe there needs to be kind of a breaking point. Maybe there needs to be kind of a snapping point. And this is Mercury, Cazimi, and Scorpio. There's some type of dark hidden truth being revealed to you that's going to uproot things. And again, this is why I use the analogy of, the septic tank. Or for example, let's say, ladies, if you don't change your oil, this is one of those problems. Your car might stop working, and then you can't go to work, or you can't drive to go do whatever it is that you do. And maybe you don't want to pay attention, and maybe you're like, oh, and I'm playing you guys as if you're stereotypical, like the stereotypical woman. Don't take offense to it, but like, if you don't want to, if it's like, that's car stuff, I don't know about that stuff, I'm just going to not think about it. And you don't change your oil, like there are going to be consequences to that stuff. So, this is one of those times of like, maybe go change your oil, even if you don't want to look at it. For example, like, for me, I get really challenged with health stuff, and I need to take a look at my health stuff, even though I get challenged to look at it. If you're like, maybe this is about home and family stuff, and you don't like to talk about the home and family stuff, maybe you need to look at it in order to fix it. So the only other thing I'll say is the moon then, of course, squares Saturn, and then, of course, goes opposite Venus, which in my opinion just doubles down on everything that I just said. So we move on to Wednesday. The moon is going to make a sextile to Jupiter, and then it'll ingress into Gemini, and Mercury squares Saturn. So as the moon sextiles Jupiter, that is kind of nice in my opinion. My only issue with Jupiter conjoining Neptune and Pisces is it's like there is this sense of like, see, I was right, but both people saying that, even though one person is clearly wrong about something, Jupiter conjoining Neptune and Pisces is kind of like looking at, what is the truth, what is real, but some people will. Jupiter might be more of an ideal. Jupiter's much more of a spiritual truth versus Saturn's like reality, if that makes sense, right? Like, sure, is it true that we would all be better if, for example, this might trigger a few people, but like, for example, like communism. Communism is a great ideal. It would totally be amazing in an idealistic world, but the reality is it doesn't really work that way. And that is a hard thing to like bring into balance here. And I'm sure people are going to say that like, well, capitalism's like that too. And I'm not trying to say that. I'm just using that as an example. But as Jupiter's with Neptune, our version of idealism is a little bit clouded in fantasy at the moment. And our ideal and what we aspire and what we have faith to be with Neptune can be really good for visioning. Like, I think this is a really powerful time to like create a vision and really like work on that. Like, what is your vision that you want to do with your work, with your life, with your career? This is really good for envisioning things, but not so good for like being very clear about what that truth is, or like, it's super easy to be idealistic. Being realistic is much harder. And it's really easy to be idealistic at this point. But I think as the moon sextiles Jupiter, there is this kind of sense of something playing into your ideals. There is the sense of, yeah, like, oh, that is going to play into my idealistic scenario. So this isn't, and I'm not trying to say like this is a bad transit. I'm just trying to say the moon sextiling Jupiter there's something about post-eclipse Wednesday that plays into what we perceive to be real, what we perceive to be, like, for example, it's kind of like, I'm struggling, I guess, finding an example of this, but with Jupiter, like with going back to like the communism thing, it's kind of like like when people say, well, social democracies in, Northern Europe work really well, and they're actually more super capitalistic countries. They're actually not socialist countries at all. And so I would say on this is that an event might play into your ideal of what you're perceiving. Not to say that that's not true, but but you're just kind of seeing something that again plays into your. For example, it's like with astrology, I know people all the time, and I'm guilty of this, but a lot of you are guilty of this, of like, oh, I have X, like we'll just associate whatever event in our life to whatever planet. Like I see a lot of people just have really far reaches with planetary associations. And it's just because we're putting this Jupiter lens onto stuff, And while the astrology is very symbolic of things going on, and I full-heartedly believe in this work, probably more than you guys do, it's really easy to attach our ideal to what we're seeing, and not every little thing is going to be associated with every little reality that we see is not going to be associated with every little thing in the astrology. This is why we have to be very specific about what planets rule what. Comment below if you know what I'm talking about, but it's like some people are like, oh, Mars and Gemini, I have been using both of my arms lately. It's like, what? Mars or Venus and Scorpio, or let's say Jupiter and Pisces, I've been, I don't know. You guys, Jupiter, it's just, Jupiter is this ideal and this lens that you could put onto your worldview and what you could see as best. And this is why, the people with the hammer and sickle in their bio, they love doing this. They love just looking at things in their ideal lens, and it's not really real. But that moon in Taurus sextiling Jupiter is like getting that confirmation bias almost. And then the moon moves into Gemini, and it's all chatter pretty much. But the real kicker is Mercury's going to be squaring Saturn here. And as Mercury squares Saturn, like, there are some hard truths. If you're on my Patreon, and I did my Ask Me Anything episode, every first Wednesday of the month I do an Ask Me Anything episode where my patrons can ask me anything. And I kind of went off on the last 30 minutes because, like, Mercury in Scorpio squaring Saturn in Aquarius, there's some harsh things that people don't want to hear, especially in this collective sense. For example, like, not to go back to, I saw a couple of comments that people are noting my COVID commentary, but the thing is, this is still something prevalent in people's lives. Like, kids literally lost like 2 decades worth of learning. So there are children out there still dealing with the consequences of all this stuff. So it's still very real in people's lives. But this Mercury in Scorpio squaring Saturn in Aquarius is, what worked in any of that stuff? Did locking down and masking everybody work at all? Did it? And I think this Mercury in Scorpio is like, hey, it kind of hurts to pop someone's bubble, and I'm not saying that this is like, it's going to get through. Like, Mercury in Scorpio squaring Saturn in Aquarius is like, it's not that your message is going to get through. It's just that you're going to say it anyway. Like, Mercury in Scorpio is like, what's that saying when your tongue is like a knife? Mercury in Scorpio is just like saying it very sharply, and squaring Saturn in Aquarius is very kind of like telling the group think like fuck off and all of that kind of stuff. Not to say that that's going to change anything, but there is this kind of like Mercury in Scorpio moment of like, I've had enough. I can't, like, that's not what's real. Like, Mercury in Scorpio is like, this is what's actually going on. Mercury in Scorpio, we're communicating with the Mars way of doing things. And Mars and Mercury are in each other's sign right now. Mars is retrograde in Gemini. We're rethinking, like, okay, we're going backwards on everything that we've just learned, and we're rethinking, we're re-strategizing, and we're getting in this new information. And Mercury and Scorpio squaring Saturn and Aquarius on Wednesday. So much of the Saturn and Aquarius authority, like, communism didn't work. It's that simple. When you give the collective all of your rights and you succumb to authority, it doesn't work. And I'm using that as an example as this Mercury and Scorpio squaring Saturn and Aquarius, where, for example, in Iran, people in Iran know that, that it's all bullshit. People in, even all these other countries know that it's all bullshit, but they don't really talk about it because they're not allowed to. But that's like what this Mercury and Scorpio moment is just where you just have to fucking break sometimes and just say, you know what? Fuck that. That's not real. Fuck that. That's stupid. And the reason I'm saying this is Saturn Aquarius. This is the authority stuff. This is Saturn. This is reality. This is authority. This is, an Aquarius. And it's this like, again, Saturn is these limitations on Aquarius, our ideas to control, society in this big way. And Mercury squaring Saturn is just, I think a lot of people have had it, and I think a lot of people are going to call it out for what it is. And I want you to think about that in your own life. Where is there going to be this moment where you need to just fucking say it how it is and be real and raw with it, even if it hurts your own feelings, right? Like a lot of you buy, and I'm guilty of this too. We buy our own bullshit. We bullshit ourselves all day long, right? This is why we have excuses. And this is one of those days where you just don't have excuses for yourself anymore. And you kind of have to call yourself out, maybe call out someone else. And Saturn Aquarius is, been the mental gymnastics with everything lately. It's like, oh, well, the cloth masks reduced transmission by 37.2%. And it's all mental gymnastics, and it's not going to work. Scorpio's a straight shooter. Scorpio's like, no, I'm calling your bluff. That's what a lot of this is. And so, again, all of this is very breaking energy, right? Like there's a lot of harsh truths to this. And so I think this is one of those days where I think you need to be really real with yourself and stop bullshitting yourself. Like, what is really going on here that you don't want to bring up, that you don't want to acknowledge, that, is very, like, it's easier to believe that, it came from a bat and it's no one's fault, and that, if we all just wore our masks, we wouldn't be here, but that's just not reality. And I ask you, and I'm just using the current, because here's the thing, the current astrology tells about the current times, and you can relate that to your current life. Like, are there areas where you're still bullshitting yourself? Are there areas where you're still, not really being honest with what's going on? And I'm not saying that this is where it's all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, like you're going to accept that. But this is a day where you do have that conversation, and you do kind of at least acknowledge by a slight bit that you've been bullshitting yourself. And I'm sorry for the people that watch this and that don't always agree with my COVID opinions. And, that's great. Something I'm actually really grateful for with my following is it surprises me all the time how many of you don't always agree with my opinions. And I like that. I don't always want to create a following of just an echo chamber where everyone agrees with what I say. So for those that don't agree with what I say, I actually kind of appreciate you guys more, even though we would totally like hash it out in an argument. I'm just saying this though of, I know we may not agree on certain things, but I think it's also important to look at the astrology. And I mean, it's just been so literal lately. Like the Mars retrograde in Gemini, I called this in my 2022 year ahead horoscope. This Mars retrograde in Gemini was going to be everyone arguing about whether lockdowns or the vaccines work. And lo and behold, I was right. I've been kind of killing it with my predictions lately, by the way. I don't know if you guys have paid attention to that. I have, though. But that's me. I'm a Leo. We get to Thursday. Venus is going to trine Neptune. Sun's going to square Saturn. Moon's going to trine Saturn. The biggest thing on Thursday with Venus trine Neptune, I talked about the illusion stuff and the delusion stuff, is Venus and Scorpio is like super toxic relationship kind of stuff. Like more of my generation has dealt with this than maybe more older people, but where you kind of, there's a cat in front of my TV, where it's like toxic love, where this relationship may not be good for you, but it's fun and it's harder to let go of something than it is to, hold on to it. It's much easier to hold on to it. And it's going to be trining Neptune, where we're going to be romanticizing the pain, right? We're going to be romanticizing and idealizing the like, oh, it hurts so good. And, oh, like, this is just romanticizing the toxicity. And I don't like using the word like toxic relationships. People aren't perfect. Humans aren't perfect. But we love each other. We're very social creatures. We have to. And things aren't always going to be perfect. They are what they are. And so what I want to sit here and say is maybe this is a day where you can at least, like, maybe your situation in your love life may not be perfect, but maybe you should enjoy it and romanticize it for what it is right now. Because not everything lasts forever. And so this is a day where, again, if you're in a toxic and a bad or abusive relationship, maybe you shouldn't be in it. But this is a day where the symbolism says maybe you kind of idealize it, and maybe you kind of go, this is actually kind of nice for what it is, or maybe it's a little bit fun. Some of you, Venus and Aries and Scorpio people like the kind of toxic fun stuff anyway. So, it is what it is. I will be saying the cat is like right in front of my TV. It's really funny. But the sun is also going to be squaring Saturn, where I will say this, with the sun in Scorpio, our egos are supercharged and like not going anywhere, and it's squaring Saturn. It's just like sun and Scorpio squaring Saturn Aquarius is our egos are pretty bruised, and I feel like this day is going to be very jaded with our energy. Venus and Scorpio trining Neptune and Pisces might be romanticizing like the pain and the resentment of like, it's not good enough, and they were so bad to me. But the sun in Scorpio squaring Saturn Aquarius is really jaded from the system. Sun in Scorpio squaring Saturn is our ego might kind of it's one of those things of like, going back to my COVID opinions, I think the first 2 months of like the lockdown were fine. I know, and don't get me wrong, I also don't think they were fine, but for the moment, for what it was, it was what it was. And I even got upset with people in the first month who were like we're just rage quitting in line at the grocery store for not wanting to wear a mask. I think everyone was totally allowed to fucking bitch and complain a year later about wearing masks. But like the first month, it's like, hey dude, like, sorry to say it, we're all in this together. And this sun in Scorpio squaring Saturn Aquarius is like, it's just you've had enough. There's so much of this week that you've just had enough. And there's so much breaking energy here. And the sun in Scorpio squaring Saturn Aquarius is like just defying the laws because you just want to break the law, because you just want to challenge the authority. And, maybe it gets you in trouble. Maybe it feels a little good to say fuck you to the authority. Maybe it feels good to, not do shit. There was a lot of people that like stopped wearing masks, even though it was still like required. They just like stopped wearing it, didn't care. And there was a point where the authority didn't stop them because it wasn't there. Like I always felt really bad for workers that had to like tell people to put their masks on. I would never be able to do that. And that's that is not your guys' job to tell people how to live their fucking lives. But anyway, the sun squaring Saturn is a lot of like your ego and your will just saying, fuck this. Like, I'm just going to fucking do it anyway and be an asshole. And I don't give a fuck. Maybe a lot of you need that. What was the other thing? Oh, and the moon will trine Saturn. That's right. Yeah, moon in Gemini trining Saturn in Aquarius is like, I like the moon in Gemini for kind of like just like popping holes in everyone's stuff. Like moon in Gemini trining Saturn in Aquarius is, again, chattering and communicating with people on your side about stuff. And, it's really cathartic when you can talk to someone that shares like same like opinions about things as you. And there seems to be this cathartic, well, for example, and again, maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't, but let's say, for example, like you didn't you challenged the authority and no one stopped you from doing that. You are then allowing someone else to kind of occupy that space. Like, for example, like if you saw someone in the store not wear a mask when they were supposed to, and then someone else sees that and they wanted to do the same thing. And it's like, there's that moon in Gemini trining Saturn, of course, of like, oh, I can do that. Like, oh, I can challenge the authority too. Like that moon in Gemini is sharing and conversing and talking and, relating it to like, also too, I feel like the moon in Gemini trining Saturn Aquarius is like, oh, the rules say that you should be doing X, Y, and Z and all that kind of stuff. But there is this kind of relating, and like the moon is like our emotions and what we are connecting to, what we are relating to. It's in Gemini. We're talking about communication here, and it's trining Saturn. There's some kind of like, or have you ever seen videos? I love seeing videos like this where someone's kind of like in the trouble with the police, but then they kind of like distract the police with something else. Like I just saw this video of like, it was like this black guy like running away from the cops, and he kind of got around this corner from him, and all the people in the video were like, he went that way, even though he like went that way and he kind of like hit himself. It's like, it doesn't hurt to help people out, in my opinion. Like this is one of those things of like, if it's like, I think that's actually probably a really good example of, if someone's like, again, someone's running away from the cops, I think you should just mind your own business. But it's one of those things of like, if it helps someone out and you kind of agree with it, it feels good. It's very cathartic. And that's kind of what I'm looking at with this transit. So anyway, we get to Friday. How far are we into this? 34 minutes. Woo! Moon's going to make a square to Neptune though, and it's going to conjoin Mars and square Jupiter and then go into Cancer. Friday's actually looking pretty rough for a few reasons. But the big thing is Moon's going to square Neptune, where there is this kind of like getting like, you might, here's another funny example, but like, have you ever been like, so a lot of you have done cocaine, okay? Let's be honest. We're all adults here. A lot of you have been yacked out. And this is kind of like when you've chatted all night long and then the moon squares Neptune and you and your friend are like, let's start a business together. And then you just start talking about it. And then there's this point where it's like, well, is that going to work? How does this work? And then the moon conjoins Mars where you're like, I'm a little yacked out. It's like 5 a.m. And then the moon conjoins Mars and it's like, I'm a little tired of the Coke. And then the moon squares Jupiter and Pisces where it's like, you ever have that feeling after a really fun night out and you just get to a point of partying too much where you go, I partied just a little bit too much and now I'm annoyed. That's what Friday looks like. So I will say it's like, have your fun on Thursday if you want to call it fun. But I think Friday is just this kind of like maybe taking it a little bit too far. The moon squaring Neptune is also like, talking yourself into confusion. And, for example, some of you, like a lot of the Gen Z people like to joke about oversharing. This is like an oversharing transit where you go, oh, I just like, again, like the yacked out analogy. It's like, I've overshared way too much of my life with this stranger that is giving me drugs. And now they know too much about me. That's kind of like the feeling on Friday. So, but another way to look at that would be as the moon, squares Neptune, there's kind of this confusion of, not miscommunication, but like kind of talking to someone and not knowing, how to navigate the conversation. The moon conjoins Mars where there's clearly like it's funny, the other day I bought some speakers off this guy off Craigslist and we ended up talking for like an hour and a half. The guy was super cool, but he just like brought up a few things where like we were agreeing on everything. And he just said like 1 or 2 things where it's like, oh, I super disagree with that, but like, I don't care. I'm just buying speakers off you. I just like, it's fine. I'll just move past it. That's kind of like what this is where I was like, and after he said that, I was like, all right, wait, we need to get going. Like, we don't need to be doing this all day long. So that's kind of like what Friday is like, you're just talking, having your chat, and then, some truths get revealed. And then you're like, oh, maybe I didn't want to know that. Maybe I shouldn't have done this, or maybe I should have, cut it off where it was. But then the moon moves into Cancer. And I'm telling you, this weekend actually looks really good for the water signs. The moon moves into Cancer where it's like, all right, we need to be focusing on nurturing, healing, protecting, what's going to make us feel good. And on Saturday, the moon trines, the moon will be in Cancer, but Mercury trines Neptune where, here's the thing, Mercury and Scorpio trining Neptune and Pisces, as I really think, I'm a Leo. I have to be honest in my chart. If you knew my chart, like I don't get away with lying often. Like it's too hard, although I'm a good liar. Mercury and Scorpio trining Neptune and Pisces. If you guys needed to lie about something, this is a really good day to lie about something. Like this is like really good lying energy. Like Mercury and Scorpio trining Neptune and Pisces is very like super gaslighty and just super like deceptive and really good for lying. Really good for lying. I think that's the best way to put it. But I think the way I would want you to positively think about this is, are you lying to yourself? And I think if you're lying to yourself, you're going to get kind of caught up in this fog of, of deception, of illusion. But I also think Mercury and Scorpio trining Neptune and Pisces is, it takes a lot of effort to like lie. Like, honestly, when you just speak honestly and from the heart, it comes naturally. It flows out. But when you lie, you have to force it. And Mercury and Scorpio and Mars and Gemini is very like forcing like a conversation. But Mercury trining Neptune is, again, like being able to say or appeal to the illusion, appeal to the fantasy through kind of a deceit or through a lie. But what I would also say is Mercury and Scorpio is very raw and real with its communication. It's very sharp with its tongue. And as it trines Neptune, going back to that vision, going back to, like, what are you dreaming about? What are you envisioning? I think this is a really good time to, like, again, lean more into the vision stuff, lean more into, like, what do you want to become? What is, visualizing what, like, the life that you want to live, what you want to do, all of that stuff. And Mercury and Scorpio is like, think of the feelings behind it. And I've talked a lot about that, but like really think about the feelings behind it. Think about, how you communicate to yourself in those kind of ways. What is the raw, honest truth? And I also look at Mercury, trining Neptune. I think I just said this a second ago, but where are you lying to yourself? And I don't really recommend lying to yourself. If you should be honest with anyone, it's probably yourself. But the moon's in Cancer the whole time, and that kind of leads us to Sunday. Because on Sunday, Venus sextiles Pluto, which is really like power, money, sex stuff, is good. I know a lot of girls that like do like OnlyFans stuff, watch my stuff. If you're into fintech or the fendom, That's like Venus and Pluto. That's like a good day for that if you're into that. But Moon is going to be trining Neptune, Mercury, and Venus. I mean, this is really like super wet and emotional. And I think to go back to that, toxic relationship stuff, the Moon in Cancer is like, it just, not everything has to be defined. Not everything has to be super clear, but the emotional depth of Sunday is really deep. And I think this is a really good day to let yourself sit in those emotions and share those emotions and express those emotions and, have fun with it. If you're a guy, like it's not always easy to share your emotions. And I wouldn't say easy. It's just not always like the thing to do. Like women are much more emotional than men, but this is one of those times where, you can be raw, you can be honest and really share what's on your heart. Like this is the Scorpio stuff. So there's not a lot of hiding. And I don't want to say that this is a safe space. It is a safe space, but it's kind of like the Scorpio stuff. It's only safe for the real raw stuff. It's not safe for the fake shit. And as we get into next week looks way better. Next week looks so much better. Venus is going to trine Jupiter. I love that. Mercury is going to trine Jupiter. I love that. There's a lot of like hope and faith restored. Both Mercury and Venus go into Sagittarius. It's party time. It's fun time. Mercury's going to go into Sagittarius. We don't need the truth. We can just, Mercury and Sagittarius. If you guys are into comedy, one of my favorite examples of Mercury and Sagittarius is Bert Kreischer. He has like Mercury on top of Neptune, and he just fucking lies about everything. Same thing with Jen Psaki has Mercury and Sag. Fauci has Mercury and Sag. Mercury and Sag is really good for lying too. And if you have a Mercury and Sag, don't take that personally, okay? But you would be really good at lying if you ever thought about doing that for a job. And Mars squares Neptune, though. We're coming back to this like information kind of crashing our, worldview on some stuff and where we've been lied and deceit and, lied to. So we'll talk about that as we get into next week. That's my final thoughts for this week. I love and appreciate you guys. I'll be seeing you next week.